Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webinar today. While we wait for everyone to join, can you please post in the chat and let us know where you're calling in from? And then I'd also like to ask a quick icebreaker question to our panelists to kind of get the ball rolling on this event. So the question is, if you could give your younger HR self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Jeffrey, do you want to start?
All right, I'll go first. I guess the first thing I'd say is I'm not sure I could give myself one piece of advice, so I maybe have two or three to think about. And the first one I would say is, no matter what happens, something that I think is really important for success is staying positive in every situation. Secondly, I would say be curious. Always be curious. Try to learn the business you're in. Try to come to things with a curious, kind of open mindset. And lastly, is be open to maybe nonlinear career paths. So that's what I would have told myself, those three things.
And I think the best, so hi, Hamutal. Nice to meet everyone. I think the best advice that I would give myself is stay very, very close and connected to your core beliefs. There are different types of HR out there, different types of organizations out there, and you need to come with your statement and your true self, and whatever it is the right thing. So I think, just giving that insurance that you can stay connected to your core, I think that would be my advice.
Both really good advice. Well, it looks like we're already a few minutes past the hour, so we can just dive right in. So hey again, everyone, welcome to HR GameChangers. This is a multi-theme, multi-episode series, and today is our 6th event, and it's the first of 2025. So today we're going to be talking about leading through change, building a resilient culture. If you have any peers or colleagues that would like to join the series, I'm going to drop the registration link in the chat for everyone. And then we'll also have a live Q&A at the end. So if you think of any comments or questions as we're kind of going through this discussion, feel free to please post those in the chat throughout. So there's that link for everybody. So we had a couple of changes on our panel today. The first is that Janice, one of our speakers, wasn't able to make it. And the second is that our usual moderator, Janelle, also was not able to make it. She's under the weather today. So I'll be filling in for her, and we're excited to have Janelle back for episode 7. So I'm Charlotte O'Donnelly. I'm a senior product marketing manager at GoProfiles, which is a GoLinks company. And we're an AI productivity and collaboration suite for modern workforces. And GoProfiles is our AI employee culture platform. So joining us today, we have Hamutal Oren-Fox, the Chief People Officer of Snappy. So Hamutal, if you'd like to give a brief introduction about yourself.
So, of course, thank you, Charlotte. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Really excited to be here. So I've been in the industry for over 20 years in different roles in HR, probably in the past 10 years, leading HR organizations, both in larger organizations, larger enterprises with over 10,000 employees, and in the past 7 years, leading 3 HR organizations in different startups. In the past year, I've joined Snappy. Snappy is a gifting platform, and it has an amazing mission to spread smiles around the world, which just by hearing that mission, you fall in love with the company, and that's what happened to me. I fell in love with the company. And we do believe that gifting has the power to make people feel truly seen. And we're trying to help organizations do that for their employees and for their customers by providing an amazing platform that has over 1 million gifts in the marketplace, a seamless process on how to provide gifting. And the most important thing is the personalized sending and receiving process of gifting. So truly seen is the theme that I'm working on for 2025. And really happy to share more about that later.
Thank you so much, Hamutal. We're really excited and happy to have you here. And then rounding out our panel today, we also have Jeffrey Schmitz, who's the Chief People Officer at Zebra Technologies.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Charlotte. Really excited to be here today. Start with a little background of myself, which is maybe a good example of a nonlinear career. I actually have a master's in computer science, and I started my work writing code. I spent a fair bit of time working myself up the food chain. I was a general manager, so I ran a P&L for a while. I came to Zebra in 2016 as the chief marketing officer, which I did through up until the last couple of years. In 2020, it was my first stint in HR, and it was as the chief HR, the chief people officer, let's say, and that was my first stint. So I spent 4 years in HR, but worked with HR a long time, and there's a great story behind that, but maybe a great story behind Zebra too. So we're a company, we're about 10,000 employees currently, and our mission in life is really to empower frontline workers to make everyday life better. And how do we do that? Well, you probably see Zebra in your everyday life, because our biggest segment is retail. We bring hardware, software, and solutions to bear. And you may see a Zebra symbol on a scanner when you're checking out of retail or at a grocery store or at a large big box store, or you may see a mobile computer in the hands of somebody in a do-it-yourself store helping you find inventory or the right kind of product that you're looking for. Or when somebody delivers your mail, at least in the US, they have a Zebra device in their vehicle at all times. You may see us in your everyday life. And that's what we do, and that's what we get excited about doing.
Excellent. Well, it's definitely going to be a great session today, and we're really happy to have you both. So kind of a quick look at today's discussion points. We're going to be covering what leadership strategies can be deployed to build a resilience culture. How do you encourage and promote continuous learning? What tools and techniques to use to keep everyone informed and engaged? How support groups and networks can help employees navigate through change, and what communication strategies you can leverage to strengthen collaboration and productivity. So for everyone listening in, again, a reminder to please post any questions or comments in the chat during our discussion, and we will address these during the live Q&A section at the end. So let's just jump right into our first question for the panelists, which is, what does resilience mean for your organization?
Why don't you go first, and we'll split every other one. You can start on this one.
Okay. So I had an amazing CEO that once said that culture eats people for breakfast. And I remember thinking, oh my God, how can he say such a terrible thing? People are the most important thing in the organization. But what he really meant is something that I've learned that is really to be true over the years, which means that people come and go out of the organization, but an organization that has a strong culture, the culture basically becomes the anchor of the organization. And what does it mean to have a resilient culture? A resilient culture is basically the one that enables people to feel at home if they are the right fit for the organization very, very fast, and to feel not at home when they're not the right fit for the organization, and to find themselves out of the organization. And I think when you do have those components, people really, really feel that there's resilience in the organization. And I think the best way there's no clear measurements for resilience, but I think the best way to look at resilience is when you see people, the way that people respond to change. So the fast or the pace in which an organization is able to adjust to change is actually a great indicator if the culture is resilient or not.
Great. I totally agree with what Hamtil has just told you. I mean, ultimately, an organization resilience lies in the fabric of the culture. And my favorite definition of culture is one I borrowed from Gartner, which is how we get things done around here. And the reason I think that's important is it impacts not just what you do, but how you do it. And that includes how you treat fellow coworkers, your partners, your customers. It has everything to do with how you interact. And as Hamtel said, it's important that a culture fosters belonging and teamwork, as well as individual learning, development, and well-being, and sustains morale both in good times and in bad. And it's often best to build a culture when things aren't challenging, but when there's significant change or difficult economic times, that's when you can really lean on the culture to get you through. And one thing that I would say that we've done here recently at Zebra is, coming out of the pandemic, going to a world where we all went home, and we hired a lot of people to be remote employees. We don't have the same kind of presence in office. We thought it was important because we had built a strong culture. We had found that we had 40% of the people who, were here pre-pandemic. We only had about 40% of the people left at this point, years after. So those people never experienced how we got things done around here when we were all in the office. So it's really important to reinvigorate that culture. And when I think about reinvigorating a culture, the way we've done it here at Zebra now a couple times is being really clear about the purpose of the organization, making sure that we had a clear set of inspirational values that we think were important, and then not just putting posters up on the wall, but getting everyone involved in workshops to understand what that means, and then have follow-up engagement and culture champions who make it real in the organization. And that's what we've been doing and working on lately as we've come back to the office over the last couple of years. It's important to re-energize that culture, reinvest in that culture. So when things do get difficult, we're in a great shape to be resilient. So that's what we've been doing.
That's a great point on kind of reinvesting in your culture. Kind of leads into our follow-up question that we have here, which is, how do you measure resilience at both an individual and an organizational level?
Okay, so I'll go first this time. I'm telling, then you can go after. For us, listening to our employees has been part of our culture and something that we take seriously. And we do that a bunch of different ways. The primary one for us is we do an annual engagement survey. So that gives us a pulse on kind of consistent questions, things that we can benchmark, things we can see going up and down. And we get a good understanding of how people are feeling about being employed at Zebra and all the things that are important. So I think that the most important thing is to be listening. That's one avenue that we use. Secondly, we encourage our managers, even all the way to the top level executive team, to have skip level meetings, to talk to people and get that feedback more real time. We do something at Zebra, since our name starts with a Z and it's the last letter in the alphabet, we have a thing called Z chats. And we actually track how many skip level meetings that our executives have with people, so we can hear from them what's bothering them, what's on their mind, what's making them maybe feel less resilient or better about being at Zebra. So those are important. Many of us have functional advisory councils, and we've even created in HR an employee experience advisory council where we get feedback on how HR is doing and how people feel about that. So that's what we've been doing to listen. And I would say that one thing we're going to do starting this year is do a more real-time check-in with a quick kind of one question, how are you doing kind of statement quarterly with an open-ended question so people can give us feedback, so we can get kind of broader feedback more quickly than just once a year in a survey, and just do it something that's super fast. So we'll see how that goes. That's something we're going to try this year.
Yeah. And Jeffrey, I love all of these. And I think, there are super amazing tools to pulse check basically what is happening in the organization, which is really, really good. I think, measuring resilience is tricky. People can say the amount of people that left the organization, voluntary attrition versus non-voluntary attrition, regrettable attrition. There are multiple ways that you would try to measure resilience, but I actually think that it's very, very tricky because different elements of attrition, for example, have different reasons, and sometimes there's a change in generation, which actually means resilience, and things can be interpreted in a different way. So I would say, and I'm connecting this to change management, I think when culture is really strong, it becomes an anchor for people in the organization. What that means is a basic trust that the company is doing the right things. When there is a basic trust from the people that the company is doing right by the business and by the people, then whatever change comes, you're able to overcome it. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have pushback on change, or it doesn't mean that you're going to have questions on change, and it doesn't mean that some people are not going to be happy with change. But the pace in which the organization is able to accept change overcome it and then move to the new direction, I think is the best measurement for resilience.
That ties really nicely actually into our next question, which is, during these times of change, how can HR leaders foster a sense of trust and transparency?
Yeah. And I think when you live in organizations long enough, you understand that really the only constant is basically change. Change happens all the time. And it should happen all the time because the world changes all the time. The market changes all the time. The business changes all the time. So organizations that don't change, it means that something is not operating in the right way. So I think, understanding and taking into consideration that change is the only constant. The way to create a transparent and trustworthy culture around change is basically what I call to treat people as adults. And treating people as adults is taking into consideration that they have the tools to deal with the truth as it is. So when you are communicating change and when you are trying to create change management, the most honest you can be about the facts and the most that you can share, this is what is happening and this is the reason that is happening, that is closest to the truth. And when you cannot share part of that information, because we know that there are situations where you cannot share all the information, just share that you cannot share that information. That is the area and that is the way to create trust and transparency. So we have a tendency as managers to protect our people. And when there is bad news, sometimes we want to sugarcoat, sometimes we want to wrap it up in a very nice wrap. That is treating people as children that cannot digest things as it is. So from my perspective, remembering that respect means to actually share the truth in the most direct way and an honest way, that is what is creating trust and honesty in the organization.
I'll have an uncharacteristically short answer to this, which is I agree with everything Hamital just said, because I think communication is at the core and it's absolutely key. I would say that what's equally important is sometimes when things are changing rapidly, even when you're being honest and transparent and telling the just straight up story to the adults as you can, sometimes you get feedback on maybe unexpected concerns or questions, or sometimes people, when they feel overwhelmed or stressed by change, they may assume the worst. So it's also important to listen during those moments of change to understand what's bothering people and sometimes respond back to that and make sure you know that at least you've heard them, if not allay fears that may be unfounded or give a response. So I think listening is just as important as communicating out, is listening and responding so people know it's a dialogue. It's not just, we can tell you, we're going to tell you, and then that's it. Get a dialogue going with employees. And I think that will really raise the trust.
Absolutely. Yeah, that communication and dialogue is so critical. What channels have you both found to be effective and inclusive in kind of communicating through change with your employees?
Yeah, I think, whether it's change, whether that's quick and disruptive or whether it's planned change, I think the most important thing is, again, it's important if it's, again, beyond HR, let's assume it's company-wide, it's best to have management all on the same page so everyone's giving a consistent message. Make sure that everybody's aligned to that message. Make sure that you have your managers aligned to that message, because often, sometimes where the resistance or concern happens below what maybe the executive team can feel. And it's important that managers all have that same message. And it's important that you have clear, consistent communication up and down leadership so they can respond in a way so that management is united. And I'll say that one technique that we've used at our company when we had a difficult financial time is the CEO started having meetings with all directors and above and sharing what was going on and what was happening in the market, how was it impacting us, and how were we responding to it to make sure that we recovered more quickly than our competitors. And that simple act of engaging with the rest of the management team, saying we're all on the same page and getting people connected, made it easier for that message to get out. Because again, when an employee has a concern and they go to their direct supervisor, they need to be able to give the same message with the same confidence that the CEO can give. So if there was a a trick I would say to make sure it works well is get everyone aligned and use that mechanism. And then also, of course, use whatever normal comms you use, whether that's an intranet site, email, whatever, Slack, whatever you're using to communicate with employees as well.
I love that. I think equipping with the managers with the tools and with the same messages is so important. I totally agree with that. I think, sometimes we trust our managers to just be there and know what to do, and we forget that they are themselves going through change. So just equipping them with the tools and with the messages and helping them through the management of the change is really important. I'll say two things. I'll say that I think repetition is key. With whatever messages you share. I think, just going over and over the message again helps people digest, and tapping into what Jeffrey said before about listening to people. I think giving them time to digest and repeating the messages over and over again, I think that's really important. And I also think that people, just like people learn in different ways, people absorb information in different ways. So using different formats in order to communicate those messages is super important, whether it's one-on-one, and then it's a written message, and then it's in all hands, and then sometimes it's in a Loom recording, and then sometimes it's in Slack, right? So it's like really utilizing all the different forms and visuals. And so in order for people to learn about this change in different ways, because people absorb information in different ways. So that is super important.
Definitely, yeah. And we spoke a bit about, kind of employees proactively coming to you when they have concerns about change. But how do you identify, maybe those employees that aren't proactively coming to you? How do you, know who's most impacted by the change, and how do you support those employees?
Yeah. So first of all, I think, change management, just like any other process, needs to be managed in a very, very thorough way as a process. So it's always starting, even if you think you know all the bits and bytes, it's always starting with preparing. What are we doing? What is the change that we're doing? Who is impacted? What is the impact? What is the risk? And you get to a place where in the smallest change, you will find a long list of people that might be impacted. So thinking through this up front and really making the investment to make sure that you're mapping all the people, I think is really, really important. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing that I've used after you have all this map and you create a communication plan and make sure that you're touching and getting to all the people that are impacted, I use the technique of actually having multiple people reach out to the same person. You will find that you will hear different things from the same person when different people approach that person. And sometimes that person will feel very comfortable to share with their manager things that they won't feel comfortable to share with their HR. And sometimes they will feel with their new manager less comfortable than their current manager, et cetera, et cetera. So when you have multiple people just reaching out, saying, how are you doing? What's going on? And hearing from what's going on with the person from different perspectives, I think you will find a very thorough approach to understanding what's going on with people and seeing how they're responding to change. I will tap into what Jeffrey said before. I think it's key for people that are impacted by change to, one, listen to them, give them time to digest, and show them that you care. And I'll add one more thing. What happens when things change, people feel that they're losing control. So when you listen to people, if they give you input that you didn't think about in the process of planning that change, be open enough to actually adjust the change, make something slightly different. That experience of somebody listened to me and made an adjustment and made a change is able to gain back the sense of control. And it makes a whole life of difference. It's a totally different experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let me say that that's a fantastic answer. I agree with all of that. One thing, just to add something slightly different to the discussion, is before you start thinking about communicating, identifying the people who would be most impacted by a change. By the way, we just did this in HR. We went from a strict, Ulrich model to a operating model. Those of you who know who are using Gartner, what they would call Gartner operating model of the future, McKinsey might call it an Ulrich Plus model. So it's a completely different way we provide all our services. And we knew it was going to dramatically affect one particular group, which is the HR business partners. And what we did before we worked even on change management communication is we realized they were going to be impacted the most, and they were so important to us that we actually engaged them in co-creation. We said, the new model, actually, you need to be involved in helping us define it. So we have a hypothesis, but we need you involved, because then you're going to get their buy-in a lot easier than just communicating it to them. So that's what I'll add, is that's another technique that we've used, is bring them into the co-creation if they're going to be specifically impacted in a way they may perceive it negatively initially, and get them to understand the value by being part of the change as opposed to just receiving the information. And of course, as Chantal said, repetition is key and communication is key. One thing someone once told me, which I think is totally true, is right about the time that the leader of the organization is completely sick and tired of a message, the people are just starting to understand. And that always gets me in the right mindset of, I always want to talk about something new and different and exciting, but it takes a while for this to be absorbed. So you can't get yourself too excited that, it's time to move on, because everyone's absorbing it. It just takes time, no matter how good you do it.
Absolutely. Those are great points. So we talked a lot about, preparing for and navigating, plan changes, but what about, the big unexpected changes that happen a lot and have happening especially these past few years, like economic shifts or industry disruptions? What steps can HR take to kind of plan and prepare for those?
Yeah, I think this is my turn to start, so I'll go quickly. I think, as part of our normal just business contingency and risk management, the first principle is, if you can identify where you think there's potential changes, unexpected changes, to the extent you can prepare and develop a contingency plan, it is really good to do so. And at least you have somewhere to start in case some of those unexpected things happen. And for people like us, or our business can have a cycle to it, it's important that we know that the cycle, even if we're in a boon, sooner or later there's going to be a challenging period of time. So we can anticipate some things, and to the extent you can, you're in a better position to deal with that situation. So that's what I would say, is you got to prepare as much as you can, and then you need to be agile and put in place the necessary plan once you recognize something challenging is happening. And last year for us was a tough economic year. We did some of the things I talked about earlier, where the CEO spent a lot of time with all the directors and above, talking to them. We consistently used every method we could to communicate both the normal and the new, to communicate what was happening, why it was happening, quarterly give people updates, what progress we're making, how are we responding to it. And now we've come out of that by and large in 2024. And I think, we were able to navigate that pretty well, but anticipating and then being agile.
Yep. And unfortunately, I think we all had to deal with different types of changes in the industry in the past few years. And I think what happens during those moments is you find yourself needing to provide a fast answer and a fast solution in a very emotional environment with a lot of turbulence. So my takeaway from those experiences were to prepare two things in advance and always have a pulse on two areas. The first one is talent mapping. So use whatever objective framework you want, whether it's 9box or whatever it is, to constantly really understand the map of your talent in the organization. You will always have, first of all, it's best practice to always try to strive for continuous improvement. So it's a good thing to do talent mapping in any case. But once you have a talent map and you have those conversations with managers, why do you need specific people, for what you need them, how are they performing, how are they doing, just having that in the minds of people and managers all the time, I think is really, really handy when you need to make very swift changes. That's the first thing. And the second thing that you need to prepare is basically some sort of workforce planning. And workforce planning in two areas. One, what is the right ratio for your organization between the different departments? So how many engineers do you need for how many product people, and how many CS people do you need for how many salespeople, et cetera, et cetera. That ratio changes between companies because the industry is different, the stage of the company is different. And having an understanding of where you have too many people, where you might have lack of people, when you need to make very fast changes and very fast cuts, just understanding what your map is and what do you need, I think that comes in handy very much. And maybe the last thing is the global spread. We all know that in different areas, costs can be different in terms of headcount. So just having a spread, making sure that you're not relying on one area. We saw different political situations impact different areas in different situations. So just knowing where you can rely on and how you can move between the different sites if you have a global organization, and how you can create contingency plan between the different sites. I think that is super important. So talent mapping, ratio mapping, and global awareness. Have a map. This will really, really come in handy in situations where you need to operate very fast.
Great points, yeah. Kind of getting us back to our theme of resilience, how can company culture help buffer the negative effects of change? And a follow-up to that, what specific cultural values have you seen to be, proven anchors during difficult times?
Yeah. So I think I'll start with actually the second question, if you don't mind. It's almost natural to come and say that there are specific values that will help you lead change like in a better way. But I actually want to say something controversial, and I would say something different. I don't think it's about what values you have in the company. I think it's about how much those values are being practiced and how much are they embedded in the culture. If you are consistent with your values and you're walking the talk, you're walking the talk, and you're not just, as Jeffrey said before, they're not just posters that you hang, but you're actually living the values. And people believe that these values are the anchors that lead you when you have to make difficult decisions. Those are the things that help basically the culture buffer any change. So I'll take two examples. So you would argue that care or employee first would be values that would really, really come handy when you're doing change management. That is only true when care can really be the one leading the change. But if it can't lead the change, and if efficiency or excellence or customer first or whatever it is the one leading, I think you're better off creating a culture when people know that excellence will win every time, even if it means that people are being let go because they're not excellent, but people know that that is the way it works and it's always true. Then basically people create the experience of trust in the organization, the experience that organization knows what they're doing, and that the experience that the values are at the end of the day are going to lead the way, and they're not just there for nice days.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I totally agree. I mean, this comes down to, is the culture alive? Is it well? Let me give an example when times are tough of when we talked about how do you sense how people are doing from a resilience perspective in place of change. Let me tell you when it's not working is when things get difficult and you see different functions pointing fingers at each other. That's when you know that you're probably not living the culture, because I've never seen a culture where teamwork or collaboration wasn't at the root of it, because it's what helps drive, a joint purpose and joint success. And there's no organization, no matter small or large, and I've worked at startups and large companies, that doesn't wasn't relying on everyone to be successful to get the ultimate goal of the company. So if I had to pick one value, which was the second part of the question, we have one, what we call our kind of teamwork values, called Succeed as One. And it talks about the culture of we can't succeed individually unless we can all succeed together. And I think putting that into practice, when things get difficult, and I've seen that in Zebra in a couple different challenging times that we've had, I don't see people pointing fingers at each other. I see them buckling down and figure out, how do we get out of this? What can we do about this situation? And that's when you know it is alive. And so that's what I would say is everyone typically has a value that's about how do we work together? And I think that's probably the single most important value.
Really good points, yeah. I think we have time for one more question to kind of wrap everything up. So, what are the key indicators that your organization has successfully navigated a major change?
All right. So, again, I think whether you're going through a change that you started yourself or is happening to you, like a business downturn or a market downturn, the first thing I would say, if you're looking for key indicators, I always say, if you start seeing yourself going into a challenging time, or you're taking on a project that's going to drive change, the first thing to identify is, what does success look like for the team, right? One of the first things you want to communicate, whether it's a downturn or whether it's a planned change, what does returning to growth look like if you're struggling on the top line? What does changing an HR operating model, what is the success criteria? And then I think the consistency of coming back to, hey, what does success look like? And what are we doing to impact that success is important. So one thing I would say is, it's not just a key indicator, what is that key indicator? You get to decide at some point when you're in either of these scenarios, what does success look like? You need to define what success looks like. Then you need to track it and then celebrate those milestones as they happen.
I love that answer. I think, sometimes we make changes we're not sure where we want them to lead, right? So just knowing in advance what you're looking for and how will success look like and defining that, I think it's a fantastic answer. I'll also say something that I think is super important. I think as managers that care about employees and that care about how people are experiencing changes, we tend to sometimes hold on ourselves to the change and not let go. And I think it's giving ourselves the legitimacy, as long as we communicated the change in the right way, gave time for people to digest, people to vent, people to say, I don't like this, maybe make some changes in what you planned before. I think it's very legit to wrap it up and to say, that is it. We are done changing. We're moving on back to business. And I think just putting those boundaries and saying we're not going to continue dwelling on the change, we're moving on, is also something that is very legit and that leaders have to do in order to protect the people, not only in order to protect the organization, but in order to protect the people and just to get back to normalcy. I think that is super important.
So true. Well, we're going to move into our live Q&A section now, see if there was any comments or questions dropped in the chat. It doesn't look like it. So I think that is a testament to how well the panel did of just answering so many aspects of this topic. So thank you both so much. I really want to thank you both for joining us today and sharing your thoughts on measuring engagement. There were some really great measurable and concrete strategies shared today. So I really appreciate both of your time. If you are attending live with us today, that means that you're pre-registered for our upcoming episodes as well. So the next 3 sessions will cover skill-based organizations, transforming talent management, empowering remote and hybrid teams, strategies for sustainable success, and HR transformation, AI's role in redefining the HR landscape. So you'll definitely won't want to miss these upcoming sessions as well. And if you do have colleagues or peers who would find this series valuable, the link to our registration page is in the chat for you right there.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. And Charlotte, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, thanks, Amtel. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining. Please look out for the February session and come join us again as we cover our next topic. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.